Do you know your metadata? Do you know what metadata is? It's kind of a boring term, and it's a term that it sounds like some tech bro would overuse at a dinner party. But today, unfortunately, we're going to unpack it. We're going to unpack what it is, what metadata do we actually need to know and have, where is this metadata stored, and once you have the metadata, how do you get it on to your tracks? All great questions, everything we're going to unpack today. In fact, I've made it even easier for you by putting together a metadata checklist. Don't you have goosebumps just hearing that? What a lovely thing to unpack for Christmas. A metadata checklist. Just go to otherrecordlabels.com/metadata, and everything I talk about today, even though it gets a little dry and a little pedantic, I'm going to keep it all together in a guide that you can get at otherrecordlabels.com/metadata. Here's a definition of metadata. Metadata refers to the information and data that describe various aspects of a music release, including details about the song, the artists involved, and the technical specifications of the recording. We'll also discuss in this episode things like artwork and lyrics and release date and genre and much more. That's what metadata is, just basic information about the release. All of this information that we're going to be talking about today is really helpful when you're getting ready to distribute your release and to promote your release, something you can do with our friends at Groover, who just so happen to be this week's sponsor. Groover is an online platform that helps you submit your new songs to playlist curators and bloggers who are super relevant to your genre and your subgenre, making sure that you're only pitching to playlists where your songs are going to succeed and do really well and reach listeners that like your type of music. To find out more about Groover, go to groover.co. The link is in the description below. But if you use the coupon code Other Record Labels VIP, you'll get 10% off your first campaign. So thanks to Groover. Make sure you check them out and get your metadata together and work on a campaign with Groover. Link is in the description below. The second question we want to answer is, what metadata do you actually need? So to answer this question, I'm going to break the metadata into 4 columns, into 4 different categories that will be easier to remember. And remember, I put this in the checklist as well. So let's talk about basic metadata. That includes the song name, the artist name or band name, the release date, or in some cases, it's just the release year, and lyrics. That's just the basic metadata. Another category might be technical metadata. That includes things like ISRC, the International Standard Recording Code, which is a unique code that your mastering engineer or your digital distributor will give you for each song. A UPC code, which is a unique product code. So ISRC goes to the individual song, whereas the UPC goes into the individual release, whether that's just one single, an EP, or an album. There's also things like BPM, which is beats per minute, or the tempo of the song. Not every genre really cares about the tempo of the song, like folk music or even rock or classical, but for tracks that are getting remixed or being used by DJs, like in electronic music and hip hop, embedding the tempo into the track is really important so that a DJ can see it right there on the table. Other technical data could include the key of the song and then the duration of the song. 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Then we have creator metadata. That includes things like the songwriter or songwriters, the copyright holder, the producer, maybe the engineer, the musicians who played on it. And finally, we have marketing metadata. That includes the cover art. So if it's a single and the single has its own unique cover art, or it's an album and you use the album cover. There's release notes that you can include in metadata as well. Maybe it's a little marketing pitch, or you can describe that this single is from a new album that's coming out in October. You can describe what the song sounds like or what are some other artists that this song sounds like. Not everybody's going to read this release notes, but it's there if they need it. You could also include genre, and some tools will allow you to add a mood or a theme. This is helpful for organizing tracks if you're like a sync agent or a music supervisor, to read a little bit about the song, to see the lyrics, the genre, and the mood of the track. Now, I keep talking about this metadata, and the question is, where am I writing this? Where am I typing this? And where is it being stored? And how is it being transferred from the MP3 to whoever is reading this metadata? So let's answer the question, where is release metadata stored? There's a lot of various locations that this metadata can be used or requested or utilized. For example, on digital music platforms. That can include your DSPs, which are digital service providers like Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. They want to know this metadata because it helps them with playlists, it helps them with categorization and searchability. You're also going to provide this data to your digital aggregator. Your aggregator is someone like CD Baby or Symphonic or TuneCore. This is your digital distributor that submits your songs to the DSPs that we just mentioned. They use metadata to make sure that the DSPs have all of the required categorization tools like the release date and the artist name and the album name and the barcode and the ISRC. And digital aggregators will take all of the forms that you fill in when you're submitting a new release, and they'll make sure that it's fed to each DSP in the proper format that they require. There's a couple music industry databases that enjoy metadata as well. Things like your PROs, the performing rights organizations, mechanical rights organizations, and Sound Exchange. For record labels, you might have a record label management software that you collect metadata to help you keep your releases organized. You might have an artist management software tool that you use, and you keep your metadata for each artist and their release in there, or your royalty accounting system. Maybe it's just as simple as a spreadsheet. There's also music metadata services like MusicBrainz, AllMusic, and Discogs. They really benefit from an organized metadata for each release so that they can connect a release on Discogs with a release on Spotify with a release at the public library. And finally, metadata is stored in the digital files. They're called ID3 tags, and they can be stored in MP3s. I believe they can also be stored in FLAC and AIFF files, but WAV files don't store very much metadata, if anything at all. But MP3s can store tons of data, including lyrics, an album cover, artist name, release date, and so much more. BPM, composers' names, songwriters' names. That's why you can take an MP3 file, you can drop it into iTunes, and all of this information just appears, including an album cover. So now the question is, our final question, how do you add metadata to your tracks? Well, we know how we add them at the digital distribution level, or we can manually submit them to AllMusic or Discogs, but how do we embed it into our tracks? A very common way is to have your mastering engineer do it. Once you provide all of the pertinent information to your mastering engineer, when they master the songs and provide you with the MP3s of the single or the album release, they can embed that data using their tools and their software onto your tracks and then deliver you the MP3s with the metadata included. You can also use software like Logic, Audacity, Audition, or Pro Tools. When you're exporting an MP3, you can fill out the forms and add the metadata to the track right there in the software. Of course, when you upload your tracks to your aggregator like TuneCore, CD Baby, Symphonic, they'll ask you a bunch of questions. You can do it there. The same thing with Bandcamp. You can actually add the release date, an artist name, an album cover, and when a fan downloads those MP3s, all that metadata will be embedded on the files that they download. That's why when you get an MP3 folder from Bandcamp and you import it into iTunes, all the metadata for the release is right there. It's really nice. There's also some metadata software tools I'm not too familiar with, like MP3 Tag or Tagr, or even just using iTunes, like I mentioned. Are you still with me? I know this isn't a fun topic, but thanks for following along. If you haven't really grasped everything yet, make sure you download my checklist and guide for metadata, music metadata for record labels and independent artists. Go to otherrecordlabels.com/metadata. Make sure you grab that for free today. And thanks again to our friends at Groover for sponsoring today's episode. It's an amazing tool for submitting your new releases, even your old releases, by the way. I recently did a Groover campaign where I submitted a 10-year-old song to Groover, and I had a really good positive success rate there. Anyway, go to groover.co. The link is in the description below, and make sure you use the code OtherRecordLabelsVIP for 10% off. I hope you enjoyed our discussion on metadata as much as you can. Thanks for watching.